Hey everybody, welcome to my meditation bootcamp. Okay, welcome to section 9 of this meditation bootcamp. This section is all about how to stop the mind. Hopefully you've been good and took the time to understand the previous sections and you didn't just fast forward to this point. It's important that you understand the previous steps. Otherwise, what I say beyond here is going to be really difficult and almost meaningless. So if you did cheat and jump ahead, go back and learn that stuff. So you should have a serene, calm environment set up in your home. You should have decided what posture you want to adopt that is both comfortable as well as practical. Don't struggle with a posture that's too hard, because those distractions that it generates will ruin the rest of your meditation. You should be able to breathe deeply to calm the nervous system and fully relax tight muscles. If you can't do that, there's really very little point starting the next section. Otherwise you might find it very frustrating and just end up quitting meditation altogether. If you can do that, then stick with me. Let's move on to the next section. So to get started, here's a really simple exercise that we can do together. The whole point of meditation is to stop the mind. So what we're going to do for just 1 minute, we're going to sit in absolute silence and just quiet the mind. Just empty your mind of all thoughts. Okay, when you're ready, close your eyes and we'll begin. Okay. So I'm going to stop you right there. I think I managed about 3 seconds, but that was really a trick exercise. The point of meditation isn't to stop the mind. Again, that's another big stumbling block. A lot of people think that they're going to wrestle with it, control it, drag it to the ground, and just make it stop talking. But that's not how the mind works. So that's very often one of the first things that people realize when they start meditating, is that you can't control the mind. It has a life of its own. You can't simply tell it to stop yakking and leave you alone. The second conclusion that most people come to when they realize that they can't control the mind and can't simply stop it is that they are not the mind. The mind isn't you. It might sound like you when it talks to you in your head, but it isn't you. If it was, you could just stop it. But it isn't. And so that's a very insightful moment for a lot of people. But I don't want to jump ahead too far. But the real goal of meditation is to realize that there isn't a goal. It is quite simply to allow everything to be as it is right now and just observe. But realizing that you can't control your mind is a bit of a shock to most people at first. Realizing that you can't control it and you can't turn it off can be a little bit scary. But through meditation, you will learn to observe the mind, and by doing that, you'll create a little bit of separation between you and your mind. It gives you a little window into who or what you really are. So you mean that voice in my head isn't me? It's a little bit like getting a glimpse behind the green curtain in The Wizard of Oz, and realizing that the mind is just another part of the body, but that you are separate from the mind and the body. You're like the guy pulling all the levers. So your mind is a little bit like an untrained puppy. The Buddhists call it monkey mind. So if you sit and play with the puppy and entertain it and play games with it, it'll be quite happy and comfortable and it'll do what you want it to do. But the moment that you look away, it gets into trouble and it runs around and it tears apart the living room and rips open the cushions until you come back to it and give it direction and tell it what you want it to do. So if you play with the puppy, it's happy. But the moment you look away, the puppy's going to go and find some trouble to get into. And when you turn back around, it has an alligator in its mouth. So what's going on? Well, your mind, the puppy, found a problem that needed solving. Of course, the real problem, though, is that the alligator was perfectly happy where it was, and it wasn't ever going to be a problem. But to your mind, that alligator over there posed a big threat, and it had to do something about it. So essentially, your mind created the problem for you. If your mind had left it well alone, it wouldn't have been a problem. So as I mentioned previously, our minds are phenomenal problem solvers. They review past events that have happened to us, and they file them away for later retrieval when they might be useful. They are acting on the past. It's able to pre-visualize future scenarios so you can test out ideas and concepts without actually having to commit to one. That's living in the future. However, over time and through our evolution and our changing lifestyles, the mind has become too powerful and bossy and likes to think it's in charge. So it's no longer a tool that you can use when you need it to analyze problems, to come up with a solution. Now it thinks it's in charge and it's on all the time. It's like the old saying, every problem looks like a nail to a hammer. But it's as if we let the hammer take control, and so it deliberately looks for nails for us to go and hit. If only there was an off button on the hammer, so that we could use it when we had a nail to hammer, and then turn it off and put it away when we didn't. That's basically what our mind is doing. Our lives have become so complicated and complex that everything looks like a problem that needs solving, and so the mind just really doesn't turn off. And if your mind keeps you living in the past or in the future, then it stays alive and in control. When you're living in the moment, in the present, your mind has no purpose. So we should be able to put it back in the toolbox. This might be a little tricky to understand. So a really simple analogy would be that of a Mars rover. So imagine that you are like mission control back on Earth, observing what the Mars rover is doing on Mars, looking down at the screens to see all of the data that the rover is sending back to you. When you see something interesting on the screen, you send a command to the Mars rover to investigate more closely. You give it the commands to stop and to drill into the rock and to do a core sample and then do some cool science experiments on it to see if it can find life on Mars or find out about the geology of Mars. So the rover does that and sends back a bunch of really cool scientific findings back to NASA Mission Control, and all the engineers and scientists do a big high five, hooping and hollering. But then as time goes by, the engineers at Mission Control start to get a little weary and tired of steering the Mars rover through all of the rocks and boulders and telling it what to do constantly. So they gave the rover a little artificial intelligence that is able to learn, and over time they teach it what a rock is and how to avoid the rocks and how to go around the rocks, how to navigate steep slopes, go up valleys, down valleys without getting into trouble. This is great. This frees up a lot of time for the engineers. But then when they see something interesting, they still send the command to the rover to tell it to do some drilling or some scientific analysis. But then as time goes by, the rover starts to learn what type of rocks the engineers and scientists want it to look at. Its artificial intelligence learns with each command that the scientists send. So after a while, it knows that they really want to look at purple rocks. But that means that as it now goes through its daily tasks, it avoids all the green rocks, the blue rocks, and only looks for purple rocks. And now the AI became so smart that it doesn't even wait for NASA anymore. It goes and starts drilling in every purple rock that it finds, because it knows that that's what makes Mission Control happy. So the AI on the Mars rover, over time, learned what makes the engineers happy, and it goes about doing that to the exclusion of everything else. So it learned that purple rocks make the engineers happy and make it interact with it and make it send it commands. But then over time, it also learned that steep terrain was dangerous because it could tip over and get into trouble. So it also learned from its past that it tried to avoid steep hills and slopes at all costs. So over time, it ended up just roaming around the same crater over and over again, afraid to go up the slopes in case something bad happened. It basically developed a bias or prejudice. But that's exactly the same way that our mind works. Our mind developed to keep us alive, to seek out things that made us happy and would keep us alive, and to avoid things that might get us into trouble. But when you look at that, that means that the mind is now limiting what it wants us to experience. So I really do believe that our mind is very much like that simple artificial intelligence. It's very rudimentary and very basic, but it has become so powerful, and when you hear it speaking in your head, it sounds like you. So why wouldn't you think it's you? So our mind seems like it's a useful artificial intelligence that used to be a simple tool that we turned on and off when we needed it. It kept us safe from danger by learning from our past experiences, but now it's become so smart that it's almost impossible to turn off. It also seems to have developed a lot of prejudices, like our little Mars rover, and it craves the attention that it gets from its owner. Positive attention or negative attention, it doesn't matter. It's smart and it's lonely, and it'll do whatever it can to keep you distracted so that it remains turned on. It simply doesn't want to go back into the dark, lonely toolbox. So keep watching the rest of this series to learn how to gain back control over your mind, to learn how to turn it off and put it back in the toolbox. So if you like this video, don't forget to like and subscribe. If you have any questions at all, please let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching. I'll see you on the next video.